Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Halloween 1978. So, this is, of course, the original Halloween movie, and the interesting thing that I find about this film is supposedly this movie didn't have, like, from start to finish, this at some point being called Halloween. At some point, this movie was also to be called The Babysitter Murders. And I'm like, okay, that really just. Like, I don't think you could have built a franchise off the Babysitter Murders, but I don't know, I could be wrong about that. So going into this film, I really haven't really watched from start to finish this movie in years. Like, I've always just wanted to just kind of get into this movie at a certain random time on TV and then watch it to the end. Like, to me, I never fully fledgedly wanted to 100% ever really watch this film, but here is my first time in years. Because this movie is just so much a slow to a crawl kind of film, and really also there's points in time in this movie where I'm like, I wish they would have like explained just a little bit more. Like, it just kind of feels that eventually they have to explain more in other films, and like explain why Laurie, explain why Michael Myers is going after Laurie, even so much more than just that coincidentally Laurie was to be in the neighborhood where Michael Myers was attacking people. We end up finding out that there is much more of a stretch of a story than that. So going into this film, like, I would say that a lot of people would probably just enjoy this film because they're seemingly at points are topless women. Beautiful, but also topless women at some points in this film. And but really also people love when Jamie Lee Curtis's character Laurie is to fight Michael Myers, and like, you also love that part too. You can't wait to that part because you're like, yeah, get him, Laurie. Like, poke him in the eye and stab him with the needle and do all that kind of cool stuff. That of course we know is going to happen because we've seen this movie hundreds upon hundreds of times now. Because every single year, it's always a staple to see a Halloween film one way or the other. And luckily, on October 15th, there is to, of course, be Halloween Kills, which is going to be the new latest Halloween thing, where, like, they don't even bother numbering the stuff anymore. It's basically just, here's another Halloween. Like, oh, we're going to call it slightly tweakingly different, Halloween Kills. Like, oh, Halloween number whichever. Like the real just giving it up, or giving up the title, because it's just like, why do we have to even title these things anymore? Just like have like it be another Michael Myers film and you should be fine with it. Honestly, if they were to ever do another like Michael Myers thing, honestly, I would love for them, instead of calling it Friday the 13th, I honestly would be fine if they just called it Voorhees. But again, that's just me. Um, I would actually love like the origin story of the leading up moment of Voorhees drowning and his mother going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But that's me. Like the original run of Voorhees' mother killing all these cabin people because basically they were lazy mother effers and didn't bother to like watch over Jason. And like, I would be happy with that story being played out. But I can whine and complain about it till the cows come home. But here's also the thing with these very iconic killers that we are known to see within our lives. always the random costume that is to be so iconic. Voorhees in his uh, blue onesie and William Shatner mask. Weirdly, a lot of people may not know that the actual mask was supposedly originally going to be a William Shatner mask, but then they painted it and tweaked it and whichever. Uh, like that's kind of weird. But yeah, so going into this movie, I feel it's weird to like tee this up because it's a long stretch of a film. It's a long crawl of a film. Uh, really, I think there have been like the Rob Zombie remake that goes more in depth about this, which like I feel bad because I've never actually seen the Rob Zombie Halloween movies. Like I don't know, I've seen all the other Halloween things that came out. I've seen like the Halloween 2018 film, 2019, whichever the one where Jamie Lee Curtis comes back and is the more current one, and then the sequel is to be Halloween Kills. Like I've seen, like I'm going to eventually see Halloween Kills, but I don't know. Like to me, if it doesn't have Jamie Lee Curtis in it, like it's gonna take me a while to really get interested. But eventually, I'll go and check out the Rob Zombie films. I think I started watching the Halloween Rob Zombie film, and then I don't know what happened. Maybe I just didn't have the time for it or whatever. But maybe I'll go and I'll finally watch it because it seems like a thing where I finally want to see the newer variation and to see which one I liked more between all the Halloween films because I've yet to see the Rob Zombie ones. So let's tee it up for people that have never heard of this Halloween movie before because maybe they lived under a rock. Maybe it was something that they never decided to watch a Halloween film. Maybe people hate the Halloween series. Maybe they always think it's garbage and people just loathe it to death compared to all the other ones. Maybe this is their least favorite. So comment down below if you have a favorite or least favorite horror slasher franchise thing. Like, just put whatever you want, really, because any comment will help out this channel. Really, it will. But like, let's say you like, let's just stick with slashers. So maybe somebody might like Fear Street that recently came out on Netflix. That's okay. Like, to me, it just reminds me of a lot of other slasher films, but like, and eventually I should probably finish up Fear Street because like I think I've seen bits and pieces of the other ones, but I've only really just seen the first one that came out. Uh, with the exclusion of like the other ones have like a timeline delivery or whatever, but still. So yeah, so teeing it up, what is Halloween about? So without a doubt, this is to be about a movie about a kid wearing a clown costume, which bothered me because I'm like, so clown costume didn't make the final cut to be the actual costume of movie? Like, were they just like, oh no, like, even, like, you should have had it all along that the last Halloween costume that Michael Myers was going to wear ends up being his costume later on in life, and then they match it. So, like, it makes so much more sense. Like, if Michael Myers was to wear a pumpkin mask and some, like, weird getup, and then eventually years later he comes back and wears that would have been mwah, perfect. But, like, it just seems so, like, he's wearing a clown costume, and then all of a sudden, like, jumpsuit. He stole costume to wear. But anyways, so he stole the William Shatner mask. Anyways, pushing on. So kid goes on and is wearing this clown costume and is to eventually notice that his sister, like, I want to cement that I don't know the absolute lore and confirmation about every single thing that is to go in this movie. So I might want to say that it's Michael Myers' sister, and someone else will come on here and be like, no, it was actually so and so babysitter, because in the credits it's not the same, whichever. Um, because it feels like there isn't an exact thing of lore upon this movie unless they retconned it, or like someone would go and watch an interview or commentary of this movie because they love it so much. Because there's those people too. So, like I've seen commentary of Ghostbusters like twice, the Blu-ray and DVD version, but that's because it's Ghostbusters. I've seen that 1,000 times anyways. So, uh, so Michael Myers goes in the house and eventually murders his supposed sister. Goes off to go into a mental hospital for a bulk of his life. Where Loomis is just like, dude, I hope he stays in there forever. But weirdly, coincidentally, Michael Myers is transitioning to another place, which is always a mistake in every single movie to transition a possible mass murderer guy. But I guess they just figure that they can just drug him to death and everything will be okay. Big mistake. So, Michael Myers is to break out of this mental hospital to eventually commandeer a nurse's car to make his way back home, to eventually find out that there is a lot of women that are nearby his home that are deciding to get a little horny, let's just say, and to get a little like into the bed sheets with quite a few men instead of going out and trick or treating or going to a Halloween party or any number of things that would actually make these women much more safer. And plus, because the only thing that they care about is not Halloween whatsoever, all they care about is going to this other dance that is to happen at some point in time in possibly sequel movie. Because supposedly the very next day is to be this dance. I'm like, why would they time that weirdly? Where like the day after Halloween is to be some dance? That seems weird. So why wouldn't they just have it either on Halloween or like somewhere in the middle of October? That seems weird. But I guess that's just me, weirdly. Maybe, I don't know, pushing on. So eventually Michael is to eventually continue to tease Laurie popping up in certain kind of garden and hedges and whichever. But then eventually he decides instead of going after Laurie right away, he ends up deciding to kind of poke his head around the neighborhood. Really just see if anybody is giving themselves the good old wearing less clothing. And so Michael is like, women are just wearing less clothing. I need to go and find them and murder them. Because I don't like that. Women need to be fully clothed. That might be it. Michael Myers does not like women that aren't fully clothed. That's his thing, weirdly. Michael, that's weird. Anyways, so, because, yeah, think about it. Any woman he ends up killing in this movie is because they're not fully clothed. He waits till they're not fully clothed to murder them in this film. But then eventually, like, I think that changes from movie to movie because the women decide to get more and more clothed. And then I guess just Michael is just like, I just want to kill people because evidently these movies aren't paying these women enough to be less clothed. So, anyways, pushing on. Uh, so yeah, it's all leading up to eventually having that big bout between Laurie and Michael, where Laurie is just really getting some licks in. She's really just taking down freaking Michael, and eventually we have some iconic scenes that are to follow after that. Because eventually Laurie is going and babysitting a kid named Tommy. So let's leave it at that. Let's leave it at the little kid. Anyways, so, because eventually when really looking at this movie, all of us were probably kids when we originally saw this movie, right? And eventually, years later, we still have been begrudgingly going and watching this movie because we enjoy it. For whenever we can randomly find it on TV and be like, hee, like childhood, but also long stretch of a film. So, God, like he's complaining and like really, the actors put really good performances into this film. It's just man, that lead up though, like I'm like looking at it, I'm like, okay, this movie gets interesting 50 minutes in. This movie really gets interesting 50 minutes in when someone really gets killed. And like even though the beginning gives you that whole like moment still in Topless Woman right in the beginning of film, still you're having to be like, but when is the next kill gonna happen? Oh, 50 minutes later. Oh my god. So let's go into it. Let's go into that double five time territory. I've basically teed up this movie anyways, which is almost kind of spoiling it. But whatever. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So I basically kind of gave away the film, but let's go into it. So beginning of the movie is Michael Myers wearing clown costume, which man, if there's ever going to be a Michael Myers game, I hope that clown costume is a DLC skin thing, because man, would that be cool. I don't think there's ever going to be a Halloween thing, because where, like, they can't do that just like Friday the 13th. It's not easy to recreate Camp Crystal Lake, but like maybe they can just recreate a neighborhood for Michael Myers to kill people in, and you could either play as Michael or you can play as Laurie and whoever. That might be cool to eventually try to like figure out how you can just weigh out Michael Myers till like the time is up of Halloween, because he only kills people during Halloween, so you just gotta wait him out till the night's basically over. Kind of like Jason, you just have to wait him out till it's Saturday the 14th, and then you're basically good, right? Anyways, or for Nightmare on Elm Street, you just gotta move to another street that's not an elm, and then you're covered, right? Just get out of that Elm Street. You'll be alive for the rest of your life. So pushing on. So now Michael Myers in clown costume is to eventually go and poke his way through the windows because he's a peeper, a peeping Tom. Seeing these two people going at it, and so eventually Michael is eventually going through the house, and it seems that these people who are doing the activities, let's just say the bedroom businesses, seem to really like thrust fairly quickly and be done with their activities fairly quickly. But it seems that Michael is going to also kill fairly quickly. So Michael with knife goes and stabs supposedly his sister, which we are to assume, not random babysitter or whichever. Anyways, so Michael then heads outside of the house for his parents to arrive and just be like, Michael? Like, huh? And so now fast forward to Michael being shipped off to the loony bin, the mental hospital. I'll say loony bin for like a real like murderer person that like has no emotions and has those supposed black eyes, those horrible demon black eyes. That it's like, so was Michael possessed? Should we get the Conjuring people out here and just see if they can like power of Christ compels you and get the demon out of Michael, and then like all of this will be resolved? Was just Michael demon child from out of the womb? What's going on here? I'm so confused. So, maybe Laurie could have become like blackened eyes character, and like then we would have had like a duo between Laurie who can't die and Michael who can't die, because maybe that should be it. That's the reason why Laurie has hung in here for so long, because Laurie can't actually die. That would be a good thing. That'd be cool to just play with. So Tori can just be convinced that all the other Halloween movies are all just all together because Laurie just can't die anyways. So, uh, anyways, pushing on. Uh, so Loomis is now heading to the mental hospital that they are keeping Michael Myers because supposedly they are transitioning him to another hospital. And Loomis is like, dude, you should have kept him in that one spot, kept him there forever, and because he's never getting out anyways. Like, you should not give this man a breath of fresh air. Like, you should basically just keep him in a padded cell forever because this guy is not going to rehabilitate. He is not going to eventually just be like, hey guys, I'm feeling better one day. I'm never going to put on a William Shatner mask ever again. See you guys later. Like, that's not going to be Michael. So, Loomis is to tell this nurse that he's with that kind of pump him full with as many drugs as she can possibly give to Michael while they're going to do this transfer. Because, like, do not... Like, this guy can't die anyways, so overdose him on drugs. Like, just like, get him anything that'll knock his butt out. Like, hit him with a sledgehammer. That should probably work. Maybe. So, all of a sudden, Loomis and this nurse are heading to this mental hospital to all of a sudden see a bunch of mental hospital patients seemingly roaming the grass of this establishment. So, Loomis is like, okay, what's going on? The nurse is like, since when did the patients all of a sudden get to roam around free and eventually just kind of like get the grass under their feet? So Loomis is telling the nurse like, hey, just stay here, I'll check it out. So Loomis is a scramble to this this little fence guard area, and so all of a sudden Michael Myers is jumping on the hood of this car, and all of a sudden he's like slapping the glass. He's doing a little glass slapping. And so there's to be this one part where Michael is to grab this nurse's hair. And so this nurse is to just kind of lose her freaking marbles and is to just get out of this car, and Michael is to jump in it and to drive off. So Loomis is now talking to the doctors at this place in this dimension, like, how is it that like these people were to break out, and how is it that Michael was to be able to drive out of here? Like, did somebody show him how to drive? Because how is it that this guy was able to like practice, learn, whichever? This makes no sense. So eventually Loomis is to, I think, also at some point go to this one graveyard and talk to this one like grave keeper, that eventually there had been, I think, a tombstone had gone missing. So now Loomis is calling the sheriff that is to be in the city of Michael's house, because Loomis knows good and well that Michael is going to return to his old home. Hence why, like, supposedly Laurie is to tell us in the beginning of this film that Laurie's dad had supposedly sold the Michael Myers' house, and that like they no longer live there, I guess, because of the whole like backstory of it all. And we consistently have people who eventually move into that house that are to like, oh, you live in Michael Myers' house? What a mistake that is. You're gonna die. And a lot of people are just like, dude, like, that was years ago, or that was whatever ago. Like, no, man, like, I'm sure everything's gonna be fine. And they're like, sure, just wait till Halloween pops up and you're gonna die. So, but anyways, I've seen, like, a bulk of these Halloween movies. Like, I've seen, like everything besides the Rob Zombie stuff. So, like, most of my bases are covered. I've even seen the Paul Rudd Curse of the Michael Myers movie, where I actually like that one. I actually like that movie, but again, people could hate it or whatever, but that's fine because certain tastes for certain folks. So, um, so Laurie is to eventually go to this thing called shul or school, however you want to say it. So Laurie eventually goes to school, and so Michael, I guess, had gone and broke into this one costume store thing to eventually go and take some items. I'm assuming a very blue jumpsuit and a William Shatner mask, which they're not going to say it's a William Shatner mask. And because eventually both Annie and Laurie drive around later in the film to talk to the sheriff, who's Annie's father, and they end up kind of going and talking about this information. There seems to be an alarm going off in this building, and so on and so forth. So Laurie, Annie, and Linda are to eventually get out of school, and so they're to just kind of walk on home. There's to be also this one kid getting bullied, mentioning that the boogeyman's gonna get him, and like I want to assume that's Tommy, but here's the thing. So Tommy goes after getting bullied by these kids to go and smack right into this guy who is of course Michael Myers. And so Tommy, who smacks into this guy, doesn't have much of a never mind about it. But then eventually, when Tommy later on sees this guy just kind of walking around this house repetitiously, Tommy freaks out about that. But then doesn't freak out about the whole, like, bumping into Myers. But am I wrong? Is that not Tommy? Is that some other kid? I'm confused. But pushing on. So Annie, Linda, and Laurie are kind of walking home. And so here's when we start to get the spots where Myers is going to pop out of certain hedges and certain kind of grassy or leafy areas and whichever. Just kind of poke off and be like, hey! I would love it if somebody would do a clip of Halloween where, like, they give Michael Myers lines in the movie to just make this movie a lot more of a comedy than anything else, to where, like, Michael Myers might be that, like, neighbor who's just kind of asking for certain items or is just asking his neighbor for some kind of help, and like these people are to completely ignore him, to where eventually he just gets so upset that they didn't bother to go and like lend him many of these items, like a thing of sugar or honey or something like that, that eventually that's why he ends up killing them. Like, basically cut off the part where Michael is to be in this mental hospital, just cue up the fact that like Michael is in this neighborhood just going and asking these people for like honey or sugar or whatever, and I think that would be freaking hilarious. So uh so Laurie is to spot Michael popping out from one of these hedges, and so Annie goes and walks over there to eventually see that there's no one really there, and then Laurie runs over to where Annie is to spot that there's no one there also. So I think before Linda ends up going off to what she's planning on doing for the night, uh, Annie and I think Linda are kind of mentioning to Laurie how like she has racked up like quite a bit of money babysitting, and maybe she'll be a millionaire after this, or maybe she'll eventually go on to college and get a pretty good education, I'm assuming, instead of really focusing on her getting a boyfriend or whatever, or going on dates. And but Laurie is just mentioned, she's like, I don't know, like I think guys think I'm too smart or something like that. I'm like, I honestly wish that there would have been a scene that would have just had like Annie or something before school like was to get out or something, where Annie is talking to some guys about Laurie, and like they could have said it's like, oh no, like the real reason why nobody wants to date Laurie is because like the whole backstory about her and her family or whatever, that like we think there's something wrong with her. Like, I wish that there would have been something like that, just to kind of really just uh, like give you more of a backstory of how you can just feel like sad for Laurie and sympathetic and just root for her, to eventually like starting that off in this movie could have really just made us be like, yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis, yeah. If we weren't already like that, like like this would have just started us off really investing in this character and just be like, hey, she's an outsider, she's a misfit, like we need to root for her. And I would have liked that right out of the gate, where they kind of like cement that like Laurie is an outsider or a freak or a weirdo or something. So we could be like, yeah, like I'm gonna root for this weirdo, freak, whatever, because like, yeah, I like outsiders. Yeah, give me some of that outsider. So, anyways, but not that Jamie Lee Curtis or Laurie is a freak or whatever, but still, like they probably would have said some weird, goofy thing like that. So, anyways, so eventually Laurie is to kind of make her way home, and eventually she accidentally bumps into this sheriff, and so the sheriff is to mention, it's like, well, hey, it's Halloween, like people are uh in into getting one big one like small scare, especially with it being Halloween. And I'm like, oh my god, like I just realized something, that this little line that this sheriff and Laurie exchange, they do the exact same scene in Halloween H2O with Jamie Lee Curtis and her mother, where uh, eventually, like, Laurie is eventually kind of looking for Michael, and all of a sudden she accidentally bumps into her own mother. That is to mention, like, well, hey, like it's Halloween, people are in for one last scare, and I'm like, oh my god, that's like freaking her mother, and like I think that's the real reason why people are probably going back into watching Psycho, because a lot of people don't remember that Jamie Lee Curtis's mother was like in the original Psycho, so that's kind of interesting. So, so pushing on. So Laurie eventually gets to her home and eventually is gearing up for her babysitting duties for Halloween. Like, she's not going to some party, she's not going to some other house that is outside this neighborhood to eventually avoid the murdering or possible killing of Michael Myers. Oh no. To where eventually, like, the sequel movie covers like the day after Halloween, which, so technically, but I guess people could say, oh no, it's the same night. Really? Is it though? I don't know. Uh, you could probably say it is, but I'm not quite sure. I don't buy it. Because really, like, there is a lot of killing being done in that one whole night, but still, anyways, it is what it is. So, like, then I would just be like, well, you know what then? Like, I just want to just start it from like the end of like Halloween 1 and then just go through Halloween 2 as one long stretch of a night, and then end it there. Anyways, pushing on. So Laurie eventually goes and is to babysit Tommy, who is to, I guess, be wearing an Evil Knievel costume. Like, I would assume, like, it looks like an astronaut costume, but I'm assuming it's Evil Knievel. And so Tommy is going and watching, I guess, the black and white version of the thing. I highly doubt you'd probably have this kid be watching the John Carpenter version or the 2011 version, because technically this was done in 1978. But still looking at it, you probably still wouldn't have had the John Carpenter version of this movie showing to a kid, because that would give this like kid like traumatized for years. Like, for me, like, I when I watched it, I was like, oh my god, this movie's such a workout. The John Carpenter version, oh my god. But anyways, so I'm assuming that probably while watching Halloween, John Carpenter's like, dude, I'm gonna be doing the thing. That's why I have this whole like reference thing of the thing in this movie, because I'm gonna be doing that piece right after I do this piece. You know what I'm piecing out at. So, anyways, so eventually, Annie is to like there's to be this kind of phone tag thing going on because landlines and stuff like that. We don't have cell phones conveniently at our grasp at this time, at our grip, at our hands. You know, cell phone. Anyways, so Annie is to try and call Laurie, and then just kind of setting things up because Annie is to mention that Laurie had quite possibly found a date for Laurie at this dance that is to happen the very next night. I'm like, what a weird time to go and do a dance conveniently after Halloween. Wouldn't you have it on Halloween? Why the day after? That seems weird because it's like November 1st then, right? So why would you have a dance November 1st? That seems like a weird thing. Anyways, pushing on. So, I guess it's homecoming, but still pushing on. So eventually Laurie's like, no, don't have that set up. Like, are you joking? And Annie's like, no, I really talked him into it. It seems like he's interested. Really just setting up for the sequel film when eventually Laurie is going to bump into this guy and eventually be working at this hospital. Uh, so yeah, so Annie eventually is to accidentally like bump butter all over her body, and immediately once I realize this scene, I'm like, oh my god, this is just like the Dane Cook joke where I think he ends up doing in the skit A Vicious Circle. Dane Cook is to mention that he ends up doing this role play thing where he is to be like kind of stalking like around his house and is to be banging on like parts of this house with his girlfriend kind of waiting outside for him to eventually come in. And so there's to be this like joke that Dane is to have where he's like banging around the house and calling the house and just kind of doing this deep voice and stuff like that. And so all of a sudden, like his girlfriend is supposedly to have butter or popcorn and spill it all over herself, and she's like, "Oh no, I have butter all over myself." And eventually, when something is to knock or bang or whatever, like Dane is like, "Oh, well, I hope that's not the Santa Anta winds picking up." And so, like, and so when I see this spot, I'm like, "Oh my god!" Like, basically, Dane Cook might have been ripping off Halloween, like during that whole skit, but who knows? Maybe that legitimately happens. I don't know. Whatever. Still pushing on. So Annie eventually goes and is to take off all her clothes, which now means that it's right for Michael Myers to go and kill her off now because she's not fully clothed. So Annie is to put on this white like formal dress suit thing and take her clothes and to dump it into the washer and dryer. And so that's in a separate house thing, shed deal. Wouldn't that be convenient to have in more recent days? But I guess really you'd be concerned that eventually you'd probably overload the washer or the dryer, and then you'd have to just kind of hear that, and so you'd hope that you can kind of catch it before the washer or dryer thing freaking breaks, which would be the washer, because why would you overstack the dryer? Because that usually seems impossible. It's not true. It's impossible. Anyways, so Laurie ends up going and is trying to desperately call for Lindsay, who is consistently glued to the movie because she's like, yeah, I want to watch whatever this movie is. I'm so glued to where, like, I would love to see a skit where we just see consistently Lindsay just glued to this TV while everyone else in this house, like Michael Myers, is just walking in and killing everybody and like Lindsay is just like, I'm gonna watch whatever this thing is, and like that would be just the most hilarious skit where we're just seeing everybody getting killed in this house, and Lindsay is just like, I'm just watching this film, I don't care. That would be a hilarious, like, what if Lindsay was left in the home skit. That would be hilarious. Uh, so eventually the phone is going off, and that's the one thing where finally Lindsay is to hear, because we just have Annie who's screaming for Lindsay, and Lindsay doesn't give a rip. To where eventually when the phone goes off, that's when Lindsay like spurns into action is to answer the phone, and it's to be Paul. So because eventually Annie is to call Paul and to mention like she's not really wearing anything, and of course Paul asks like, "Oh, what are you wearing?" And he's like, "What is that? All you think about?" Come on, Annie, give the guy a little bit more. Well, probably not all that kind of credit. Come on, like I'm sure he's just like, "Yeah, can't wait to just see you without anything on, because that's all I'm thinking about. Just imagine you naked all the time." Whatever. That's the whole thing that I think women don't understand. Men have imagination. They can wait till whenever a woman wants to declothe, because we have already clothed her within our minds. As well as probably women have done the exact same thing. Which is okay, because more than likely they'll just probably be disappointed, because that's bound to happen. So like, yeah, I thought he would have been like more ripped. I thought it would have been a little bit more hung. You know, because that's bound to happen. Anyways, so eventually Lindsay is to rescue Annie from the washer and dryer shack, because evidently she had weirdly locked herself in. What's up with people like easily locking themselves into any of the places within this movie? Like, you would have thought that like Michael Myers wouldn't have been able to get into any part of this house, because man, no one else can get in or out at any parts of these homes. So you would think that Michael Myers would just be stuck behind some door, just desperately trying to get to someone and can't, because no one else can get in or out of certain spots in this movie. So, anyways, Lindsay goes and rescues Annie, who is now stuck in this window. So she was not only stuck in this laundry shack thing, but then she's also stuck in the window. She's stuck everywhere. This girl needs to come up with some kind of unstuck situation to, I don't know. Anyways, so now Annie is like, Lindsay is to make fun of Annie for getting stuck, and Annie's like, "Hey, don't tell anybody about this, because I know that you have probably gotten stuck somewhere, right?" And so immediately when Annie is to come back into the house with Lindsay, and that's when we get the whole like Annie talking to this guy Paul about her being less than clothed. Lindsay ends up picking up the phone for Paul and telling him, it's like, yeah, Annie ended up getting stuck. So Annie ends up picking the phone up, talking to Paul, and so on and so forth. So Annie then goes and is to talk to Lindsay, and is like, "Hey, like, I know that you're so infatuated with this movie. You're just so super glued. But hey, do you want to go across the street and watch this movie with Tommy?" And Lindsay's like, "Yeah." And you were thinking that eventually, like, there was going to be some romance brewing between Tommy and Lindsay that was going to carry throughout these films, but no. That eventually, all of a sudden, in one of these movies, we're going to have like Tommy and Lindsay come back and eventually have to fight off Michael Myers at some point. Wouldn't that have been cool to just have this moment where eventually Tommy and Lindsay come back and try to like that would have been a cool moment to have like a real like, yeah, they came back. But whatever. That would have been a cool thing to go into, but they never did. That that garbage. Even if they would have just been people who would have just been quickly killed off in some other film, the reference is there, the thing is there, but whatever, it's too late now. Uh, so now Laurie is now having to haggle over both or handle both Lindsay and Tommy, and so we just have consistently Tommy who's to poke his head out the window and is to see Michael Myers. I'm like, oh, it's the boogeyman. And Laurie's like, you know what? Like you're getting so like hard to handle. You know what? I just want to put you in a room, just have you go to bed. Like you're just getting annoying, kid. Like because we have also Annie who, when she's at her home, the dog is barking and Annie's like, oh my god, like this dog hates me. So uh, so let's kind of cover what ends up happening to Annie. So it seems that Annie was eventually going to go and pick up Paul, and so she ends up going into her garage. I think her garage, yeah, her garage to get her car. And so it seems weirdly that the car is weirdly just fogged up. I wonder why. Because maybe somebody's breathing too freaking hard because Michael is breathing so freaking hard into this mask. Like, that's all you get to see of him. Here's also the thing about this movie. The soundtrack of this movie bugs the crap out of me because it's these two things, these two, like, I don't know if I said this, so I want to say this now. The two ding, 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 are like, but we have this long stretch of these two notes, and I'm like, God, this soundtrack freaking sucks. It's such an annoying soundtrack. But eventually they perfected it over years to where it doesn't sound as bad. But good God, like, there's parts of this movie where I'm like, man, you could just have a car horn and hold it like they do in this movie. And that would be the soundtrack of this thing, just like the most annoyingest sound in the world is kind of what is going on in the soundtrack of Halloween, in all brutal honesty. I'm just like, God, this is just so annoying and so just, oh, I hate the soundtrack of this movie. It freaking sucks. If you're going to play me the soundtrack originally of this film, I will never go to your house ever again. Because that thing just freaking sucks. Anyways, pushing on. So, Annie is now home alone without Macaulay Culkin going, ah! Pushing his hands against his face. Ah! So, Annie is to go in her garage, and so eventually, of course, what ends up happening is Michael grabs her from behind because she didn't check into her back seat if anyone was there, because urban legends will tell you to do so. So I think what ends up happening is Michael ends up going and snapping this girl's neck. Can we confirm that? It doesn't look guaranteed. It looks like he might just have choked her out, but I would like to think that he snapped her neck instead. And then so Annie goes and falls under the horn, where it absurdly is to be fairly horny for a while. Then the horn dissipates, and then we're like, okay, so nobody had like a thing to just pop their head out into any of the other neighbors. Just like, man, that horn is really going on there for a while. Like no one, I guess, cared. So we eventually have both Linda and her boyfriend Tom or is it Tom? Let's reconfirm. Linda and her Bob. Linda and Bob. So Linda and Bob eventually are to make it into the home, and they're kind of waiting out for eventually Annie and Paul to make their way over to that place. And so eventually Linda at some point is to, or maybe no wait. So Linda is to call Laurie at one point, and we end up having like her like chomping on something, and so Laurie ends up hanging up, and so Linda ends up calling back. It's like, hey, why did you hang up? And it's like, well, I didn't think it was you. And so like, I wonder if Fight Club took that whole scene where like when Brad Pitt is kind of munching on those like potato chips and he's talking to like Edward Norton. I wonder if they took that scene from like Halloween where the girl is just opening the scene with like and like Laurie's like, dude, I'm not gonna watch, I'm not gonna listen to anybody like eating stuff on the thing. I'm gonna hang up. And then like Linda's like, hey, my mouth was full. Couldn't you have like swallowed or whatever? Like, I wouldn't want to hear you chomping away at the bit. So, uh, man, some yeah, freaking nails, I tell you. Like I was like kind of going like this for I don't know how long, and I was like, anyways, pushing on. So, because that is so relevant, right? Just irritation of nails, just 9-inch nails that are to be playing in your life. Pushing on. Uh, so Linda's be with Bob, and so of course, like Bob is just like, hey man, let's just like go on the couch and let's make out. Hey, let's go and find a bed and let's do it. And to be done within like 3 to 4 thrusts. Could we really just legitimately count out the thrusts? And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, like, was that good for you? Yeah, it was good for me. Let's smoke it out. Which, couple of thrusting, and that's all you need to be busting. Busting makes you feel good, I guess. So, anyways, so we, of course, have Bob who is to go and get Linda a beer and then vanishes forever because Bob goes down to the kitchen to go and get a beer, and he ends up getting a knife for his trouble because eventually Bob is to eventually start hearing like somebody in the room with him, and so he ends up starting to open the door, and all of a sudden Michael pops out and is to go and knife Bob, sticking him to be against this wall, and so Michael goes and takes this ghost sheet and gets the glasses that Bob was wearing and makes his way up to Linda's room. And so here's the goofy thing that I was kind of disappointed about this movie. So all of a sudden, Linda is to eventually be like, hey, did you get my beer? And like, because if she hasn't said totally about a bajillion times in this film, which is okay, like that's her catchphrase, like that's her thing, totally. Like, and plus also for that time, like Linda was trying to be this valley girl and whichever. Like, I think at one point I ended up listening to like an interview about her, like kind of talking about the movie and whatever, which I thought was interesting. So, anyways, so now, of course, we end up getting the spot where Linda is to eventually flash Bob. But in all actuality, we don't really get to really see much. Where Linda's like, hey, see anything you like? And I'm like, no, I don't really see much of anything. I just see like little bits or whatever. I don't know if that was like to be the clip where you can't really see anything, or if that was the original way that this was to be done, where you can't really see much. But then eventually we get this spot where the phone is ringing again, and so Linda goes and tries to pick it up, but then Michael, of course, is behind her and goes and takes the phone cord and chokes her out. So I'm like, what is it with Michael? Like, he just loves to just choke people, I guess, in this movie. Like, you know what? I really liked Friday the 13th movies where eventually you would have we eventually had Jason's character kind of doing some unique things with the campers and stuff like that. It wasn't always like the same choking out approach of a thing. And that's what I think where I liked like the Friday the 13th movies just a little bit more they went into some unique ways of killing people at some point in time, which I eventually enjoyed. Eventually, yeah, at some points you would eventually have uh like Jason always like choking somebody possibly against a tree, but like I think like eventually there's always that staple of always just starting out a movie with a good tree choke. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? You know what I mean, Jellybean? Anyways, so now Laurie is now answering the phone and just like really getting into the gargles and the thrusting and the whichever of Laurie trying to say something. And so now Laurie is like, "Oh, so I get your like just classic just nom 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 like eating your food, and now I have to like listen to you squeal now. Like, how awful are you, Linda?" And so like Laurie is to just hang up the phone. So now we have Linda, who of course is now down for the count. So now it just gets to where okay, Laurie needs to like do something. And there's only how many times that Tommy is to spot the boogeyman, and Laurie just doesn't care. Uh, and so Laurie is to eventually want Linda to have Annie call her to confirm uh, when uh, when Lindsay is going to like need to go to bed. So because I guess Tommy and Lindsay are having a sleepover, I guess forcibly. So uh, so eventually Laurie is kind of getting curious about kind of what's going on in this house. So eventually she just pops over and it's to like knock on the door to like see if Annie or Lindsay are going to come out of this door. And so she like continues to just kind of pop her head around to just kind of see if eventually anybody is going to like eventually just come to the door, and no one does. But all of a sudden, eventually, Michael comes around, and so then eventually, Laurie is to just start running to the uh, the home of which where she is babysitting, and by that time, both Tommy and Lindsay are going to bed, and so Tommy is to get back up to just like, okay, what's going on? So Laurie's desperately banging at this door, and so she ends up closing to tell the kids to just go and like lock the door and like just kind of bunker down. So Laurie is to just kind of poke her head around the house, just kind of see what's going on, poke her way to see kind of windows and stuff like that, to eventually have Michael kind of crashing through this window to make it into this home. So coincidentally, Laurie is to eventually find this sewing needle, and so she ends up poking freaking Myers with freaking needle. And here's the thing, like Laurie is consistently stabbing this guy with something, and then just going like, "Oh, okay, well I think he's dead now. Like, let's not try and call the cops or anything because she can't really do that anyways." Because I think when she ends up trying to call the police, like the phones aren't working. Because isn't that a quinky dink? Plus, we have the one spot where Loomis is to be by the Myers house, and the kids are just to like try to creep up to the home, and Loomis is to scare the crap out of one of the kids to get him to run off. And he's like, ha 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 ha. But then eventually, right after that, he bumps right into the sheriff. It's like, whoa. And so, like, the sheriff is like, hey, doctor, a little jumpy tonight? And, like, Loomis is like, yeah, I'm jumpy. Because, freaking, you don't understand what you're getting yourself into. You don't know Michael Myers like I know Michael Myers. And so, yeah, so there's these little bits and stories, like the sheriff and Loomis end up heading into the Myers house to find a dead dog in there because, of course, when uh, Michael was at Annie's, he ends up sadly killing a dog. What a horrible thing to see in a movie. That's so awful. So, anyway, going further. So, of course, Michael is to get back up. And so that eventually leads just Laurie to eventually scramble up these stairs and to tell the kids what to do. And so now Michael is heading up these stairs, and so what ends up happening is now Laurie is to, like, I want to get this perfectly correct, because like at one moment we have both Tommy and Lindsay who end up like scrambling out of the house to eventually like run to the neighbors, but I don't know exactly when that happens. Like, does after Laurie gets Michael the first time, is that when she goes up the stairs to tell the kids to run off? I'm curious. But anyways, so eventually the kids are to run out of the house. Loomis ends up seeing these kids running out of the house. So Loomis is like, okay, I'm just going to poke my head into this house and see if Michael's just so happens to be there. So eventually we have the whole closet scene where Laurie is eventually bunkered down into this closet, but she's making way too much freaking noise. Way too much noise. And so, because of course she can't see, but still, like it's obvious Michael would figure out that she's in this closet, but she kind of like tries to like lock the closet the best she can by tying these ties. So Michael comes bursting through this closet. The best scene of this whole movie, and probably the franchise, is just this closet scene where Michael is busting through this closet because, of course, like boogeyman and whatever, something is always in the closet, traditional kind of thing, mindset of things when you go into horror stuff. So Laurie eventually pokes out the eye of Michael, just striking back with this one little iron thing. And when really looking at it, if you're to look at people's closets now, they probably don't have that kind of thing in their closet anymore. So, like, now you would have people just trying to poke at Michael with plastic hangers, which just won't be that effective, but call of the times, right? So, Michael ends up getting stabbed in the eye with this thing. So, it's a cool, interesting cut scene. And so now I think that's when Laurie is to tell the kids to get the F out of there. And so Laurie, I think, is to eventually, I think, try to just kind of relax, because she's like, God, I'm so freaking exhausted. And so Loomis is making his way up into this house. And so, of course, this is when Michael gets back up. And so, wait a minute. So Laurie is to eventually just start, like, walking, and Michael's is, like, quickly behind her. And so now, like, Laurie is now, like, kind of locked in with Michael, and there's to be this spot where we end up unmasking Michael and see his actual face. I'm like, yeah! We see Michael unmasked in the very first film, because you're never thinking that you're ever going to see an unmasked character right out of the gate. Or they always have these big reveals and like Scream and stuff like that of who the actual killer is. Like, Laurie just rips off this guy's mask and is like, ugh, and then he puts it back on. And so now Loomis comes in and is to fire quite a few shots against Michaels, and so Michaels is falling back. and then Loomis is to fire more shots to eventually have Michael fall against this like balcony thing, and then falls over and spadooshes onto the ground. And so Tommy numerous times had asked Laurie about the boogeyman and who is or what is the boogeyman. And so Laurie never really quite got to it or explained it or whatever. And here's also the goofy thing. There were so many spots where Laurie was to be doing like some kind of comic books or some kind of something for Tommy to eventually do. But then eventually Michael Myers got in the way and ruined all those activities. So eventually Laurie goes to Loomis and is like, well, was that the boogeyman? And so Loomis is like, yes, he was. So Loomis is to pop his head back over to just see if Michael Myers is still there, and all of a sudden Michael Myers is to be gone. So I'm like, wouldn't you have seen Michael Myers pop right back into the home again, trying to attack any number of these people? But I guess conveniently when we go into sequel and to see how that perfectly like all aligns, we'll kind of see how it's like, because this is from the exact same night supposedly. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about Halloween. Like it's an hour and a half movie, so like, and I talked for like an hour, so I'm gonna get the heck out of here. In all honesty, I tried to review this once before, and bizarrely, my setup just turned off, and I'm like, oh my god, I was just in a pretty decent part about this movie, and then it just shut off. Like I was like kind of knee deep in finishing like about half of this movie off, and then this thing just cut off. So for any like real heavy Halloween fans out there, like hopefully I did this movie some kind of justice. I know there's a lot of people that are gonna pick through things and have heavily details that I don't know about because I've just watched this movie 100 times and whatever, and I don't know the little gory details, so to speak, about a movie like this. So if there are people that eventually have seen this a million times and eventually watch the commentary and have little tidbits, go ahead and leave that down in the comments below, because I know there's those people out there. So let me know about any little tidbits or any information that you're to have about this movie, because I know there's people that have that kind of lore or whatever out there. But yeah, just let me know about how Halloween, the movie, like you've enjoyed it over the years, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that have those stories. But yeah, so like I probably should have said that in the very beginning of this because probably nobody stuck around the whole hour. But if you did, thank you. I really appreciate that. It does mean a lot to me that a lot of people will listen to whatever I have to say for X amount of minutes. So thank you. Uh, but yeah, so with that said, I didn't even do like a grading system with this movie. I think that's kind of like a regardless kind of thing because people are still going to watch this movie regardless of a grading system because it's so like a staple thing to always watch every Halloween. Whether you think that this movie is boring or you only like a certain part of it, you'll still watch. You'll watch other Halloween movies that you probably like more or whichever. I think for me, I think the Curse of the Michael Myers one would be normally one that I pop in for whatever reason. I don't know why I like that one so much so. But anyways, I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.